What is happening, guys? It is, and today we're going to be covering my new AMD 9070. Now, I wanted the XT version, but they currently did not have them in stock when I went to Micro Center that is local to me, and they did have the 970. So I went ahead and picked up a Hellhound RADEON RX 9070, and I am thoroughly impressed with this thing. This is on cinematic settings for the first Descendants, cinematic for the ray tracing, and I'm averaging roughly 38 frames per second. We go ahead and dive into high settings across the board and high settings for ray tracing, and when we actually get into the game, you can see that we're at around 87, 85, 84 frames per second, and it just runs really good, and everything looks absolutely amazing. And this is in 1440p resolution. Now, this was a massive upgrade from a 1080 Ti, which is originally what I had before. And so now let's go ahead and dive into Marvel Rivals and take a look at the frames that I'm actually getting on this. I went ahead and put everything to the max rendering scale, max ultra quality settings for Marvel Rivals, just to see what my actual frame was. And it looks like I'm around like 89 to 90 frames in this, and it performs really well. Now, personally, I like playing this game because I have a high refresh rate monitor. I like to have as high a frame as I can possibly get. So the settings that I actually normally play Marvel Rivals with is actually these settings right here. And this gets me around the 200 to 180 mark, which is perfect for my refresh rate on my actual monitor. And I'll just go ahead and show you guys that right there. And you can see the frames that we're getting with this 970. I'm actually really impressed because I did get this for MSRP, which I paid around $620 for it, if I remember correctly. And I am thoroughly impressed from upgrading from a 1080 Ti to the AMD 970. So now let's go ahead and take a look at Monster Hunter with ultra settings, 1440p, and we also went with the highest setting for ray tracing. And this was about our average FPS, and the score that we got at the end of the benchmark test was actually excellent at an average of 97.60 frames per second. Now we decided to run the same test with this same card with ultra settings but no ray tracing on, and we actually got some really good frames per second, as you can see right there. Like I just said, I'm just thoroughly impressed from going from a 1080 Ti to this. I tried running this on the 1080 Ti, and I think I averaged 19 frames per second and didn't even go through this test. But if you actually look at the end for this test, we got a excellent score, and then we also got the average of 105.05. Really good card in my opinion. So now we'll go over the actual profile. So if you come over here to performance and then you come over here to the tuning tab, we're going to get these different profiles for the GPU that we can run it off of. Now, I did run these tests on default, and there was a slight difference. It wasn't huge or anything like that. I didn't do any of that footage or record any of it, but I did test this one, and I also did mess around with favorite performance, and they both worked fairly good. I personally like setting it up custom because I want custom fan curves, and I'll just go ahead and show you that right now. But one thing I do want to say is if you undervolt your GPU, it will actually run cooler. So we can come over here to this GPU tuning, and then I would slowly boost this up in increments and then run some tests, and then figure out what works best. I do know that my card can take an undervolting of -75. So we're going to go ahead and hit apply on that. That's where my card runs like all the games I've thrown at it efficiently. And now it does crash at 85 when it comes to Monster Hunter World. And so that's where I backed off to 75, ran the test a bunch of times again, and everything was solid. And if we come over here to the power tuning, this is just pretty much how much our power supply can give the actual full GPU. And I'm going to go ahead and give it as much power as possible and hit apply. Now, when it comes to the fan tuning, I like to set up my curves in a way. I like to disable zero fan speed, because I want my fans always moving to circulating air on it just to keep it cool. Even when it's not needing it, it just keeps it cooler, in my opinion, and it'll keep those components lasting longer. If we come over here to the advanced control tab, we can set our own curves. And I like to set these all to 100% on the fan curves. And then I like to set the first temperature to 35, and then the second temperature to 40. And the reason what this does is that when I'm just like browsing the internet or anything like that, or just using like, Google or whatever internet browser you're using, it's not really going to be kicking my fans to 100%. My temperature stays pretty much under 35. As you can see, we're down to 34 right now, and our hotspot's 37. And once this isn't being used, it'll literally just drop below that temperature, and then the fans will actually start to tone way down, and they'll actually go below the 25%. But once it gets up to that 35, it'll kick up to 25%. And once we're gaming or something like that, then it gets to that 40 range, and then those fans just run full blast just to keep the GPU cool. And in my opinion, I'd rather just work the fans than to let the GPU get too hot. So this is the way that I set my fan curve. You can do however you want. You can set it up however you want. I would just try to keep your GPU within about 75 to 78 Celsius. And those are all the settings that I actually ran all of these tests on. But that's pretty much the test that I have. Am I happy that I upgraded a 1080 Ti to the AMD Radeon RX Hellhound 9070? Yes, it's a huge upgrade. Do I wish I could have got an XT? I do wish I could have got an XT, but I'm actually really, really happy with this video card. And so far, it runs pretty much everything that I've thrown at it. And I don't really see any issues with it. So if you're looking to get a new video card, but then save a little bit of money, and AMD right now is knocking it out of the park, in my opinion, when it comes to these video cards. Now, I haven't been able to test like a 9070, and I don't really test video cards because, well, I'm not that big and I don't have that kind of money. But I will say, going from a 1080 Ti to a 9070, it is leaps and bounds in difference. I actually tested Monster Hunter with a 1080 Ti, and I think on low settings, I was getting anywhere between 20 and 30 frames. And now I'm getting like 105 frames, which is crazy on these tests. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. Definitely consider subscribing, and I'll see you guys around in the next one.